Hello. It's Halloween weekend when I'm recording this, so this is the look I've got on today. Being Human is a television series about three housemates and great friends who just happen to be a ghost, a werewolf, and a vampire. It also happens to contain several parallels to chronic illness that I am dying to discuss. Spoonie House. After saving Josh's life and learning of his episodic condition, aka being a werewolf, Aiden confesses that his thirst as a vampire is similar to an addiction, which is another condition, and that perhaps if they moved in together, they could keep an eye on one another. Trickled in throughout the story, Aiden also has photosensitivity, as an evolved play on the mythology that vampires burst into flame in sunlight. He stays in the shade, wears long sleeve clothing outdoors, and wears sunglasses. And Josh has OCD, obsessive compulsive disorder. Their idea of moving in together reminded me of Spoonie House, an idea some chronically ill pals and I came up with. It would be a house where our group of friends with different chronic illnesses would live to combat the loneliness, to just be there for one another, be able to offer support or intercommunal accessibility and safety, to be among people who understand.
You can hear me?
Yeah.
And people who've been around the block and have things to teach us, to be our mentors.
You went searching for drug change under the wrong couch cushions, lady. I'm calling the cops.
Josh.
What?
She's a ghost. Right?
Right.
You're not my first ghost.
So, how can you see me anyway?
Well, think of us as sort of different countries on the same continent.
They move into a house where Sally lives, who, as opposed to Aiden and Josh, her condition is literally death. She's dead. And after 6 months of isolation, going unseen and unheard by anyone who entered the house, it was a thrill and relief for these two monsters to move in and keep her company. She's still stuck in her pajamas, though. Very relatable. Life transitions and grief. The three housemates all relate to the loss of the lives they've once known. Sally and Josh, having these losses so fresh, discuss the pain with one another. After Josh became a werewolf, he had to leave his home, his job, his friends, and his fiancée. And Sally has lost the same things with her death. They grieve the plans they once had for themselves. Both Josh and Sally at one point cried, "I had plans."
I used to think this curse was what happened to me once a month. And I realized this is the curse. Every day. Sitting on a bench, watching people walk by, eating sandwiches, making plans, being what I used to be.
I was gonna get my master's, and now I have nothing to read but stupid blogs over your shoulder. I would love to just open that door and magically walk back into the life that was ripped away from me. I did have plans, you know.
Monsterness, like illness, doesn't really care about your plans. Becoming chronically ill and often homebound will likely have you feeling those losses too. It reminded me of the many ways chronically ill people, including myself, deal with this grief, with the loss of certain abilities they once had, the people who were once part of their lives that now won't or can't meet them where they're at, and the plans that they once had for themselves. Chronic illness takes them down a different path. Disability acceptance, shame, and pride. There was a lot of dialogue between Aiden and Josh about making other people like them, or creating other monsters. relatable to contagious diseases or passing on illness via genetics. Aiden understood and accepted being a vampire as a curse as well as a powerful gift simultaneously. Josh dreaded his episodes of being a werewolf. He felt a lot of shame for what he was and was absolutely fearful of ever risking anyone having to go through this experience as well. Ultimately, throughout the series, we see both of them turn other people and how that turns out. Josh accidentally scratches his girlfriend, Nora, who then becomes a werewolf. And although it can be painful, the experience does bring them closer together. Nora is at first afraid, and Josh desperately throws himself into working to find a cure. But ultimately, Nora is actually faster at embracing her life as a werewolf, no longer in a rush for a cure, and in fact teaches Josh to be more accepting of who he is.
Our relationship began because you wanted to feel more human. You wanted to be human. And that's the difference between us. You want to be human. And I don't think I do.
There's even a small family of werewolves called the purebreds, who were all werewolves by lineage and prefer that state to their human state. They not only accept their condition, but have tremendous pride in what they are, which is an experience Josh has difficulty understanding.
You guys want to be wolves all the time. This is a huge mistake. Get out. No, get out.
Rehabilitation, treatments, and cures. Aiden's addiction to blood can be compared to that of medicinal drugs, maybe. He needs blood in order to survive, but he loses control and drinks to a point where it's fatal for his victims. Throughout the series, it seems to be compared to alcohol or drugs by showing Aiden as, quote, blood drunk when he overdoes it, where he slurs and can't keep his balance. His goal is to stay clean by only drinking bagged blood from the hospital instead of live, but at times falls off the wagon, which he does a couple of times throughout the series. In season 2, he struggles a lot with his rehabilitation and staying clean, and hides this from his housemates because although this was supposed to be their safe space to be themselves, he played the role of mentor in the house, and he felt a sense of responsibility to them and didn't want to let them down. He may consider this part of himself too scary even for them, and doesn't want to tarnish their friendship with what he feels are his failings. I also saw a parallel with how they spoke about the people that he has killed and how ashamed he feels of it. Reminds me about the shame one feels for the actions they may have committed when they were under the influence of drugs or alcohol. That's a hard feeling, this feeling of shame and guilt for times that you felt out of control. In the series, we do have a little dabble with witches and magic, and Sally is able to attain her own magic. Sally felt very powerful and wanted so much to use her magic to help other people. It became a pattern for a while that we'd find Sally butting in on conflicts where she wasn't asked. It's comparable to when one person with chronic illness finds a treatment that provides them relief. They might get overexcited and assume that this same thing will also work for everyone else. But that's not true. And she learns that. It so happens her magic was, in a way, its own condition, because every time she used it, she faced consequences. She would go back in time uncontrollably, and the more magic she did, the longer her trips became, and the more likely it was that she got permanently placed in the past and unable to return to the present. Which, again, wows me in metaphor. That the thing that makes her feel powerful and alive also has these consequences or side effects. And how poetically the side effect is the potential to be stuck in the past, which goes in sync with her inability to accept her condition. In her case, that would be her death, or more specifically, being a ghost. It also is very Spoon theory. You want to do the thing that makes you feel good, but doing the thing that makes you feel good gives you consequences after. The discussion of cures was also something that we got to see a lot of on the series, and we saw 3 different experiences. First, we had Sally come to life through a witch's spell, and she was enjoying her new freedom, but had to make a sacrifice and live with side effects in order to have it. Josh became human after killing his maker, but when he becomes human, he can no longer see Sally because she's a ghost, and because he is no longer a monster. I thought it was very interesting that was the sacrifice that Josh would have to make. He can no longer see his friend, someone he really cared about. And I kind of took that to mean how sometimes when one loses the identity that provided them community, they can start to distance themselves from that community because they no longer see it as their current experience, but as something they wish to move away from. And Aiden, he becomes human again after a sacrifice, but then has to die a short period after because all the years of being on the Earth's surface immediately caught up with him. Similar, I suppose, to a remission followed by relapse, because he got to have a short period of humanness, which was then followed by death. Sally had a similar experience where she came back to life, but had to die shortly after as well. Invisible or non-apparent disabilities. I feel like being chronically ill, there can be so many attempts to hold on to what we consider to be humanity. And that's also what this show is about. Being human. Trying to keep a sense of normalcy when thrown into completely untypical circumstances. A lot of the series, particularly for Josh and Aiden, is about blending in, something people with invisible or non-apparent illnesses can certainly relate to. Depending on the person and on the illness, it can feel like we're in our own disability closets until we come out and reveal that part of ourselves. I do need my wheelchair to get around, but in other ways, I could very easily blend in, have a limited ability to walk, and you see me sitting here talking to you, maybe laughing sometimes, you would never know or think that I was in pain. But I am. And you wouldn't know unless I communicated that with you. Some people consciously hide it, and some of us are just so used to it that we instinctively fake well. By the end of the series, Aiden, Josh, Sally, and Nora are a family, loving each other, supporting each other, and venting and unloading one another because as family, they feel safe and comfortable to do so. It's the full, multi-dimensional familial experience. And to think, they likely would have never even become friends if it weren't for their conditions. Thanks for listening, everyone. I hope you found this video interesting. I really enjoyed watching the series, gathering my thoughts for this video. If you have any opinions or things that I overlooked, more ideas about the series, leave them in the comments below, and I will see you eventually. Bye.